Long ago I shared a flat with him and borrowed his money. Yet if I hadn't known this world-scale Australian film director for most of my life, I'd still want to meet the man who made The Getting of Wisdom, Baker Morant, Don's Party, Black Robe and Driving Miss Daisy, among other films equally fascinating that never stood a chance.
Bruce, you're always ready to make an extremely successful movie and then seize your first chance to make a script that is absolutely unfinanceable. That's been the shape of your career. Why do you do that?
There's not a simple answer to that. I mean, with a lot of these scripts you call unfinanceable, not a lot, some of them are enormously successful. I mean, the most obvious example being Driving Miss Daisy, which took something like 5 years to get financed.
You're kidding. I thought that sort of started off as a blockbuster.
No. That film...
That was one of your danger movies.
That was an independently financed film, financed from Canada and Italy, finally with a budget of $7 million.
Which is not a lot.
It was nothing. And it was a film that everybody advised me not to do. It had the worst readers' reports on the screenplay that I've ever read in my entire life.
What did they say?
They just said it was a complete piece of trash. And only Richard Zanuck and myself believed in it. We fought and fought for years to get the money together. I mean, I had a friend, a big producer friend. This is not going to be a boring story, it'll be fairly quick. I had a producer friend called me and said, Bruce, if you've got a film that needs financing, I really want to work with you. And I said, I have a script called Driving Miss Daisy. We have $5 million, and we only need $2 million more to make the film, and I believe fervently in this film. And he said, I can tell you now I'll do it. But he said, send the script over and let me have a look. So I sent the script over, and he didn't call me. So I called him about 2 days later, and I said, what did you think? And he said, well, look, what I said to you is true. I'll finance anything you want to do, except Driving Miss Daisy. He said, I cannot get myself involved with a piece of rubbish like that. And he said, I strongly advise you as an old friend not to do it or your career is finished. Anyway.
This was the script we actually saw.
Finally, yes, exactly the same. Yeah. And of course the thing is nobody knew who was in it. You see, Jessica Tandy was a stage actress known to people like you, but not to film people. And Morgan Freeman had done a small part in one film. That was all. And nobody wanted to be involved. Finally, Richard Zanuck pestered Warner Brothers so much that they put up the final $2 million. And we made the film and won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and the thing was a huge blockbuster.
But wait a second, you made the movie, but then what happened? I mean,
well, when
did the studio take one look and say, this is going to be a colossal hit?
No, it's a very astute question. The studio never looked at it at all. We finished the movie and we kept putting on screenings and we invited the studio heads. Nobody ever came.
They didn't come to their own movie, right?
No. And then I heard they were going to release it in an art house in San Francisco. And I said to Richard Zanuck, I think it's good. And he said, I think it's good too. But he said, we can't get them to look at it. So we kind of resigned ourselves to this. And then one day I got a phone call from a guy at Warner Brothers. And he said, what happened to that picture you made about the old black guy and the old Jewish lady? And I said, well, I've got that here. And he said, bring it over. I want to look at it. I said, what's going on? He said, bring it over. So we put the actual print in the car. I didn't want to show him a video. So I drove over to Warner Brothers, and I thought, well, they'll all be here to see it. I got to Warner's. There's only one man.
You had the actual print is 6 big cans of movie.
Yeah.
Huge
and he
cans.
took it into the projection theatre to see,
but
there's only one guy. Yeah. And he said, he was very friendly. He said, I'm the head of marketing here, you know, hi Bruce, nice to see you, great, and all that. And I thought, where's he been all the time? Anyway, we sat down to watch the movie, the film came on. About 15 minutes into the movie, he just got up and strode out. And I thought, well, that's it, you know. And then he said to me, he was pacing up and down in the foyer, and he said, we can sell this, we can sell it. I said, well, you've only seen the first 15 minutes. He said, I don't need to see any more. We can sell it. And I said, well, tell me what's going on. And he said, well, you know we had a big Christmas movie called In Country with Bruce Willis. I said, yes. And he said, it bombed. He said, it's gone. He said, we do not have a release this month.
No Christmas movie.
And he said, so we're looking at all the little movies we invested in. And he said,
finally, they're looking at the movies they made. Eh?
We can sell Driving Miss Daisy. Next thing I knew, it's all over the place. I thought they should do this with all my films.
There's a link then between what the studio spends on promotion and the result.
Yes, you know, it's no coincidence that the two films I made that have taken the most money were the heaviest and the second heaviest promoted.
Yeah. And those were, that's Double Jeopardy and...
Driving Miss Daisy.
Driving Miss Daisy. Yeah, Double Jeopardy is big hit. I'm bound to say, it would have been a hit with me if it had never been promoted, because that woman is in it, Ashley
Judd.
At my age, I shouldn't say things like this, but she just races my motor.
Well, you're not dead yet, Clive.
No, and I certainly was alive when I was watching her.
No, she's
Why isn't she the biggest star in the world?
Well, I think that since the release of Double Jeopardy, she hasn't handled her career that brilliantly. In fact, I can't think of what she's done. Someone said to me she's coming out in something, but it's been like 3 years now. So I'm not sure. I would have thought she'd go straight into some other major film, but she didn't. With a lot of actors, you know, you see young actors in particular, and they're beautiful and talented, and you think, oh my God, they're going to really hit the top. But they often make the wrong choices. They do the wrong things. They take time off when they should be working, or they put themselves in small parts in obscure movies.
I thought she was one of the reasons the film was a hit. I mean, it's a well-scripted, well-directed movie. One of the reasons it was a hit was she was one reason, and the other reason is it has to be Tommy Lee Jones, and because it has to be Tommy Lee Jones, you have to pay for him, right? Oh.
He had a role a kangaroo couldn't jump over. I mean, he was earning a fortune. But he's a wonderful guy. He's a very, very good actor. I liked him a lot. He's extremely straightforward. One day we were shooting a scene. He said, "You're so lucky I'm in this film." I said, "Why is that, Tommy Lee?" And he said, "Who else could deliver this dialogue?"
But he's not insane, or some of those.
No. Oh, he's wonderful, total professional actor. He had years and years in soap operas on TV and all that kind of thing. He's really, really trained. He can do anything. No, he's a great guy to work with. He walks in right on the dot every morning. He's word perfect, you know.
There's a big discrepancy, isn't there? When you look at your filmography, for example, you'd say there's Breaker Morant made a lot of noise. Everyone knows about Breaker Morant.
It didn't take a penny, of course.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say Double Jeopardy made a lot of noise, but there's a big difference between what they earn. Now, Breaker Morant...
Well, Breaker Morant only cost 800,000 Australian dollars, and I don't think it's got it back yet. I mean, it has not made any money. But people don't employ me because of actually films like Double Jeopardy. When people call me up and say, "Bruce, I've got a script and I want you to read it and I want you to direct the film," it's because of films like Breaker Morant or Black Robe.
Well, I have read that. I mean, you were actually asked to direct Blade Runner because of Breaker Morant.
No, I think they did call me about Blade Runner. Never got that far. Besides, I couldn't have directed it as well as Ridley Scott in a million years.
Well, you're different kinds of director, but you could direct Black Robe all right, and he couldn't direct Black Robe.
Black Robe is a different kind of director.
I think Black Robe is an extraordinary exploration of another mentality, the Indian mentality. But if I said that to a studio director, the studio director would say, "Well, that's I'm glad to hear that at dinner, but I don't want to make a movie about it." Who was ready to back such a strange idea? It is
Canadians. Because the story happened in well, of course, it wasn't Canada then; it was just North America.
Incidentally, did Black Robe ever make its money back?
Yes, Black Robe did pretty well. Well, I mean, pretty well for that kind of film. Okay. Yeah,
we've got that established. It was worth making to somebody, right?
It got its money back, yes. Oh, it was a big hit in Canada. It made a lot of money in Canada because it was part of their history, but they'd never dealt with it. One night, about a year after it was made, I was at a big party in Vancouver, and there was a lot of French-Canadian directors there, and one of them came up to me and he said, "You're Bruce Beresford. I have a bone to pick with you." That's an imitation of his accent.
He was some sort of
French Canadian. Yes. And I said,
I could tell straight away from that accent.
And then he said, "The French-Canadian film community is very angry with you." And I said, "Why is that?" And he says, "The story of Black Robe is magnificent." He said, "It was there all the time and we didn't film it. And you came from Australia and filmed it." Yes.
It's a good story.
Only in the interest of clarity.
It's a good story, though. And, yeah, but you came from Australia, but most Australians don't get that idea either. It's peculiarly...
Well,
penetrating other cultures is one of the things...
I think I'm fascinated by it because... when I was very young, I think 24, I lived in Nigeria for a couple of years, and it was the greatest culture shock anyone could have had, you know.
You brought some of it back with you, I remember, because the war broke out while you were there.
That's what I did.
And the survivors were living in your house here in London, I remember.
Oh, I'm still in touch with a number of them, and I'm going back for a reunion. But it was such a culture shock, and it gave me a tremendous sort of curiosity about people whose backgrounds were so different to my own. So when I got onto things like Black Robe, it was fascinating to research all the stuff about the Indians and try and find out how it was they live and what they thought.
I should say one thing about Black Robe. A lot of people watching this won't have seen it because it's still a minority film.
You can get it on video and DVD.
I think it'll be remembered as not just one of your best achievements, but one of the great films of its time. But the essential thing about it is not only is it about Indians with feathers, Canadian Native Americans.
First Nation.
They're actually speaking their language.
They were,
it's a subtitled movie throughout, which is usually box office death, and it demands an awful lot from the audience. I loved it, actually. That's the aspect
there's not a huge amount of dialogue in the film.
How did you know what these guys were saying?
They all spoke Cree.
Right.
Yeah. They were Indians.
Yeah. How do you know they weren't fooling you?
Well, I didn't know that.
How do you know they weren't saying things like "working for this bastard is getting me down"? You didn't.
This is possible that's what they were saying. But then I very carefully directed their reactions so that it always tied in with the words. And
yeah, I'm definitely only joking because it's
utterly
convincing on that level. But you're actually from the beginning, and it's something I've admired about you since we were both 18. Is that you were not only a dedicated artist, you were going to be an artist film director, but you had a practical sense, and you figured out that unless you were a commercial director as well, none of it was going to be possible. In other words, you had to survive in the industry.
Sometimes I wonder how I did. I think it was just...
Well, most don't.
Just tenacity, just sort of keep going. And even when things go horribly wrong, I mean, if you actually quit... And I've seen people who are enormously gifted quit because they couldn't take either horrible reviews or just disappointments over money raising and things like that.
Well, you keep up a fairly high strike rate, do you? You've never done less than a movie a year since you started, have you?
That's about right. But I get bored if I'm not making films.
Some of the projects you do take on, I'm bound to say I think the new one is Suicidal. It's the life story of Alma Mahler. And Alma Mahler married or made love to or both Franz Werfel, going backwards now, Walter Gropius, Oskar Kokoschka, Gustav Mahler, and Gustav Klimt.
Klimt, the jury's out on Klimt.
Anyway,
there were a number of others.
But she's connected with all these men, and I know who she is, and those guys knew who she was, and you know who she was, but hardly anybody else does.
Well,
so you're really making a movie that is really has to not just has to really create a character for the audience.
It is difficult. What you're saying is true. I don't know that I mean, if you went around and said to people in general, we're going to make a film about this person or that person, who are they? They would hardly know who anyone was. Nobody had the remotest idea who Lawrence of Arabia was until the film came out. So you can't just dismiss it because... No, you can't just dismiss it because of that. When I was trying to get the money for the Alma Mahler film, I went to a number of studios in LA, and I had this meeting with some big executives one day, and they said, "Who is this Alma Mahler?" And I tried to put it simply, and I said, "Well, she's the wife of Mahler, the composer." And they said to me, "You want to make a film about the wife of a non-entity?" I said, oddly enough, I wouldn't have described Mahler as a non-entity.
Yeah, but they would.
They would, yes.
Yeah.
But yes, it's true. People don't know who she is. Most people don't know. I don't know ultimately that it matters that much.
Well, it's going to matter if the studio says, well, no, we can't afford the billions it will cost to tell the audience who this person is.
Well, of course, they are stressing this in the promotion. See, for the last few days I've been going through the trailers and posters and publicity handouts and all that, and they're trying to sort of place it. And, of course, they do what they always do with this kind of film. They'll aim at the kind of writers and reviewers who do know. And take it from there.
It's only a beautiful-looking film. You could stop it anywhere and just publish the stills.
Who knows if it'll work or not? I mean, maybe not. But I'm cynical enough to have I've been told often enough that things had no possibility of working. And they did. The most striking example being Driving Miss Daisy, which they said was absolutely out of the question.
Yeah. I want to raise what should be a sore point for you. You're such a tough character, it probably isn't. But you took a hell of a lot of flack for King David with Richard Gere dancing in his nappy. And I thought it was one of the most interesting films you did or anybody's done about the biblical past. I could see where you ran out of money.
It had some good scenes in it.
I could see where you ran out of money. I could see that some of the battle scenes were quite short. And I deduced from that you ran out of time.
We had colossal technical problems. Yeah. It was a production nightmare.
Where was Palestine? Italy, wasn't it?
We filmed it in the south of Italy. Everything went wrong. Sometimes you get onto a film and everything that could go wrong goes wrong. We got there and they had snow in July in the south of Italy. Oh.
The Anzio campaign was like that back in 1944. Yeah.
Richard Gere, who's actually a good actor,
I think so too,
is miscast in that role.
I would have been better.
Yes, I would have been better. In fact, at the time we were doing the film, I wanted to use Daniel Day-Lewis, who was then on stage in London, and I rang the studio and I said, I think there's a lot of advantages in using an unknown in this role. He doesn't bring any baggage with him. I said, there's a young actor on stage here you ought to come and see. And they said, no, we don't want him. I said, look, do me a big favour. Before you say you don't want him, come and see him. And they wouldn't do it.
Well, it's a terrible pity.
Richard worked hard and tried.
He worked hard, and he's a terrific. He's a terrific actor, but he carries.
He's a fabulous guy.
He carries the American gigolo.
Yes.
Role with him.
He brought all that.
Well, that doesn't work with it. See, it's no. I think it's
but the script. I think among the many problems with that film were that it's all meant to be about the friendship between David and Jonathan. That's a key factor of it. There are no scenes between them.
Why is this the studio cracking down on it?
No, it was we never got the script right.
Yes.
And we had to start, and
It can happen that the movie starts rolling and the script's not ready. Yeah.
It's a juggernaut. It starts moving, and you think, I'm the captain of the Hindenburg. I can't get off.
And we're using hydrogen instead of helium. Yeah.
It just...
So the script wasn't ready when she started shooting.
The script was not ready.
And after that, you're just to slow death.
Yeah, but I still thought, I saw bits of it again on television not long ago. There are some good scenes in it.
Edward Woodward is the most amazing as King Saul, and it's a completely convincing performance. It's one of the few movies about the biblical past in which a role like that is convincing. It's like you really feel it's another time.
Yes.
Well, so the press...
But it was very disappointing.
Well, the press had a lot to go to town on. I don't think... When I was seeing, I said, I know what's going to go wrong with this. It's no good David dying of lust for Bathsheba if David is such an attractive guy. It's got to be something he shouldn't do, and it just fitted too well. And also, I suppose Richard dancing in the nappy didn't really help. But the critics went to town on you in a way that I thought, if this doesn't stop him, nothing will. So how did you sleep?
Well, I think I may have had one night awake, and after that I'm okay. And then I go on thinking about the next one.
Well, Kingsley Amis used to say, in fact, he said it often. I was there when he said it. He said, he let the reviews spoil his lunch, but he makes sure that it doesn't spoil his dinner. And the other thing he said was always have the next one on the go. Always,
yes, he's right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm busily doing that now.
You got one? I mean, you're ready for the current movie to flop. What are you?
Well, I'm always What
are you preparing now?
By the way, I'm proud of the current movie.
You're right.
I'm preparing Boswell for the Defence. A film about James Boswell.
Great role.
True story about him defending a group of people who escaped from Botany Bay in 1792.
English actor for Boswell?
Michael Caine.
Michael Caine.
And Michael Gambon playing Lord Dundas.
Well, anyone who was appreciated acting would say yes, Michael Gambon for Boswell and Michael Caine for the Cockney.
There were no Cockneys in this. Michael Caine will be playing it with a slight Scottish accent.
Well, he's a big star.
He's a big star, and he's a good actor, and people love him.
Yes.
And the role...
So do
you
I.
haven't read the script, but I mean, the script called... We know the sort of person Boswell
He'll probably get an
I think
Oscar.
he has the flair to bring it off.
Yeah. And he's got the balls, actually.
And Gambon's role is huge. Gambon's one of the greatest actors I've ever seen in my life.
He's Johnson, is he?
No, he's Lord Dundas, who was the man Boswell had to appeal to. He'd been dead for 15 years.
Oh, right, so he's not in it.
No, he's not in it.
So what's the story? This is about Australians?
Yeah, there was a group of convicts. This is a group of 11 convicts who escaped from Port Jackson, Botany Bay they call it.
Where you and I were born.
That's right. In 1792, they took the only boat in the harbour.
Which is not long before we were born.
That's right.
It's not long ago. They took the only boat.
They took the only boat in the harbour, which was a 14-foot cutter, and they sailed it to Timor,
Jesus.
which was longer than Bligh's journey. Pretty incredible, considering none of them were sailors. And they all got...
And you're filming that?
No, well, in little bits, yes,
Yeah,
we are filming
flashbacks.
that. And then when they got to Timor, they told the Dutch they were shipwrecked sailors. Then a British ship called into the port for supplies, and one of the officers on the British ship recognised one of the 11 people as a convict.
So even then, you couldn't hide.
You couldn't hide, and then the story all came out. Then they were arrested. They were put on the deck, in cages on the deck of a British ship, brought back to London, and on that journey, 8 of the 11 died, including this young woman's 2 children. It's a tragic story. Then she got back to London, and the 3 survivors were then sentenced to be hung as escaped felons. Yeah. And Boswell had the job of defending them. He got them off.
He got them off. It's a fabulous story.
It's a good story.
Fabulous, fabulous role. And you're completing script preparation even as we speak.
Oh, the script's all done. The script's written by an Australian called Patrick Edgeworth, well known. And no, we're in pre-production. We're just finished casting, and we're getting all the locations and everything together now.
Well, it's been more than 40 years since your first movie, which I was almost the scriptwriter of, but I foolishly turned the job down.
Maybe not so foolish.
No, I was wrong. I saw it. It was called The Devil to Pay. It was about 1959. Does the copy still exist?
Yes.
You couldn't buy them all up and burn them, then?
No. See, I really hate that film. I hate those sort of films because in those days I was trying to make films that were based on other people's films, which I think a lot of people do.
It does make you think when you think that the first movie that Polanski ever made was Knife in the Water, and the first one Orson Welles ever made was Citizen Kane.
Fabulous.
And the first one you made was The Devil to Pay. But
That's true.
Someone has to start somewhere.
Yes, and I think I was a much slower developer and probably not as talented, certainly not as talented as either of them. But, you know, you finally...
I'm not so sure.
But you finally get to the point where you think, this is what I want to say and I'm going to say it.
Keats once said, Keats would have been a great film writer, he said that he favoured a slow ripening of the faculties. Now, he didn't live long enough for his faculties to ripen, but I know what he means. There somehow the man who takes a long time, or the woman who takes a long time to learn something, learns more and learns deeper. And I'm not so sure that Wells, for example, ever got any wiser than he did with Magnificent Absence.
Yes, you know, the funny thing is with Wells, that as brilliant as Citizen Kane was, I think his films got better. I think Chimes at Midnight is one of the greatest films of all time.
Yeah, but William Shakespeare had a big lot to do with it.
Vraiment. Nevertheless, it is a brilliantly realised film. The quality of the direction is absolutely stunning.
And it cost £4 relatively, didn't he? He shot it on short ends.
Oh, yes, and I've got that film on cassette. I've got 2 cassettes of it, and I watch it frequently and just marvel at the genius that went into that film.
One of the things I've always liked about you is you love the movies. You taught me a lot about them, just the ones you mentioned. You were the first person who ever talked about Hollywood movies and made me realise not only that I had already liked something, but that I ought to appreciate the fact that I'd liked it. You know, I'd seen the John Ford westerns and so on, but it hadn't occurred to me they were serious. I was still swallowing the line that Hollywood couldn't be serious. And I think you once said, I think you were talking about, what was Ford's version of The Gunfight at the OK Corral, My Darling Clementine.
That's his best film.
You said it's one of the best movies ever made. And I'd seen it, and I'd enjoyed it more than any movie of its kind. And I realised, well, if I'd enjoyed it that much, maybe it is good. See, this is a connection a lot of people don't make.
It is a truly great film.
It's wonderful. Yeah. And Fonda is just fantastic.
So is Victor Mature.
Yes, isn't he? As Doc Holliday.
Can't believe it.
I'm ready to see it again now.
That was a great director, you see.
But in those days, you used to keep score of movies. You'd have sort of...
No, I know. You used to rate them all. Oh, that must have been a pain in the bum.
No,
you know?
you weren't. You were fascinating.
Oh.
Yeah, I caught that enthusiasm from you. And more important, I think when people are that age, what they catch from each other is the legitimacy of enthusiasm. I felt that way about things, and it was just nice to meet someone who...
Well, you made me enthusiastic about Auden, to an extent that I bought and read everything of Auden's. I've got photographs. I've gone too far. I've got photographs of him stuck up.
If you can finance a movie about Auden in Hollywood, I will buy you a beer.
Oh, God.
You have to tell them it's a good story. Berlin.
They'd never heard of Singapore when I was doing a film. They certainly won't have heard of Auden.
That's a true story, is it? I've heard that story told by others than you, actually.
Yes.
By people. What was the movie? It was
Paradise Road.
For people in Paradise Road have told me that Hollywood hadn't heard of Singapore.
No.
And
They said, you better change the name of that town, it's silly. I said, change it. I said, you under the impression I made it up? And they said, this guy said, you mean it's a real place?
Anyway, it's a pleasure to watch your films. It's a pleasure to meet you in person occasionally, but you're so busy. How many places do you live?
I've cut it from 3 to 2. I sold my flat in LA. So I've only got a place here in London and a place in Sydney.
And you work in Sydney now. You can work in the studios there.
Yeah, there's these huge studios. And the Boswell film, we can go back to Sydney and do all the sound mixing right in the city. Yeah. It's easy.
So that's going to only grow. Australia's going to get bigger that way.
I think it will. It'll never fizzle out now because there's such a power base of technicians, top-class technicians, and fabulous actors. Just before I left, I had a meeting with a casting director out there about shooting the Australian stuff on Boswell, and she said to me, you know, I get phone calls nearly every day from Los Angeles saying, have you got any young Australian actors who might be good for such and such a story? And she said, that never used to happen. She said, 2 years ago it didn't happen. She said, now it happens all the time.
What's the attraction? I see the attraction of Russell Crowe. He's actually not an Australian, he's a New Zealander, isn't he?
Yeah.
But he's got thick legs, eyes very close together, and he's very masculine. And there's a demand for that.
He looks like a real bloke. Yeah. He's a tough-looking guy.
And the women look like real women. Tall and rangy and dangerous.
The actors out there are very well trained.
Maybe that's part of it. Also, maybe they're less bullshit.
They're easy to deal with.
Less bullshit.
Yes. Yeah. They come in and they say, right, what is it? We'll get on with it. And when you get one that doesn't do that, you're really taken aback because that's what they're virtually all like.
A pleasure. Until next time.
Thanks, Clive.